Welcome back to Bexhill West. And as you can see, there's been a great deal of progress with the station platforms, and the station canopy structure has finally been constructed in all its glory. Now I've still got the glazed units to sort out on the top, and it is presently still just balancing on a few temporary columns, but you get the idea. And you can see how the paving detail of the straight elements of the platform is coming together. However, beyond the length of the canopy structure, the platform has a distinct curve to it, and that needs to be dealt with slightly differently. So in this video I'll show you how I've done the platform top for the curved sections. But first, let's just revisit what we've done so far. So regular viewers will know that when I set about designing these platforms, I was keen to incorporate this sort of prototypical slope away from the rails that's been incorporated on railway platforms since the Wellingborough disaster. And the marble test sort of shows what's involved there. These just slope back, not by much, but just enough away from the tracks, such that stray prams and trolleys and things won't cause a problem falling in front of the trains. So those of you who've been with me a while will have probably seen my video I did before around how I made these platform sections. And this piece here gives an example of how I've gone about painting it. Now I'll do a sort of a more in-depth video on the painting when I've finalised exactly how I'm going to go about it. Now you can see, and it's exaggerated by the very bright light that I've got above me, that the surface finish here looks very chalky. Now what I've done is I've basically just used a chalky pastel and rubbed it all over the surface of this, such that the chalk sort of embeds itself into the joints between the slabs. Now that looks a bit, if we look here, this looks very white and a little bit over the top. And if you look at the platform behind me here, again it looks a bit overdone. Well, I've not finished with it yet. And what I have here is just a paper towel with a bit of isopropyl alcohol on, and I can wipe a lot of that away. So I'm going to continue experimenting and working on this. Now I've got a selection of different coloured pastels, all sorts of different greys, and what I intend to do is sort of work on this with all sorts of different grey tones and kind of make this look a little bit more natural. But for now, and particularly under this bright light, it does look very white, but rest assured when it's sort of natural daylight, the effect is quite realistic. In my December update video, I commented that this sort of slope on the platform caused me a small problem when it came to the transition with the sort of the flat station concourse. And I said I'd sort of show how I went about solving the problem. And then promptly forgot to do so. And somebody called me out on it in the comment section. So for the purposes of answering their question and just being clear, I'll show you a close-up of this little section here and what I've done. Now hopefully it's clear in this photograph that you could see the transition between the sloping platform tops and that station concourse at the end. And the solution to that was a triangular sort of infill piece. Now this rather cruel close-up shows you sort of what's involved. It's just a straightforward triangular piece, and that takes the transition away from that sort of, I'm going to call it the gutter, that central piece between that sort of runs down the middle of the platform and just raises up to the concourse level. Now I've looked at good quality paving work, and I noticed that really where these slabs sort of meet, the two planes intersect along these diagonal lines, that the slabs tend to be cut really neatly, and so that you get a neat transition, and the really good work, the lines of the paving sort of stays intact. So I've tried to copy that here, and you can see that the rows or courses of paving slabs all line up. Now it's a silly detail, and once all the canopies are on, nobody's going to know it, but I shall know it's there, and it's important to me. Now this picture again is a rather cruel close-up, and it shows you how where this sort of chalk pastel that I've rubbed onto the platform surface has worn away in some areas and left gaps. Now I'm quite pleased with that, because one of the things I wanted to do was to put some little bits of moss here and there along the platform surface, and the fact that this chalk has kind of worn away gives a perfect opportunity for me to do just that. Maybe glue some bits of something in there, or maybe even try rubbing a bit of green pastel in. Again, you can see the whiteness of that finish, which is there's far too much white on the slabs themselves, but that will all clean up. In fact, it all wipes off, and I've tried several colours on this already, so I'm hopeful that I'll be able to get that looking really good. Although I'm not really very good at artistic-y things, so you know, no guarantee that's going to work out brilliantly. But so far, I'm pleased with the effect that I'm achieving. Now, just for the record, each one of these paving stones is 8mm square, and as for these little point stools, well, their bases are 3mm square, and the detail on them, I just can't see it with my eyes at all. I have to take a picture and zoom in. But just to give you an idea, this is all quite small scale. Now, the station platforms were straight for approximately half their length, and that length which was covered by the canopy. However, thereafter they took on a sort of a gentle curve, and the tops of them were covered in gravel, or if you look at this picture here that was taken shortly after the closure of the line, covered in grass, but basically covered in gravel, and that's required a different approach to completing the platform tops. So in this next segment I'll show you how I've achieved that effect. Okay, I begin the process by just wetting the surface that I'm going to put the clay on with some dilute PVA. This is the same mixture that I'd use for laying ballast. And the secret here is to get the surface not wet, but just damp, just moist. If you put too much water down, the clay will tend to go quite slimy, and it's much harder to work with. But if you don't use any moisture, then the clay will, as it dries, tend to lift off of the surface, and it's much harder to press down anyway. But a little bit of moisture there will help. You can see that moisture already soaking into the MDF. Now, I think this is a bit like plastering a wall, in that when you get your first coat on, you just want to whack it on as quickly as you can. And I'm using my fingers and thumbs, and I can feel that this stuff is sticking to the surface, and that's another good reason why, just to do it in small bits at a time, and you'll feel it stick. Now you can see that moisture that I put down on the MDF platform top starting to dry up. So I'll come back in a minute and just add a little bit more. Now I tried a rolling pin here, I don't know why, that was a bit of an experiment, but it's really no good. The correct tool is a little trowel, in this case a kitchen spatula, or palette knife I suppose that is. And what I do is put a slight bend in the palette knife, and that helps me as I'm trying to level the surface. It helps push any excess forward as I'm working. Okay, so a bit more moisture added, and we just carry on pressing this stuff down, small amounts at a time, fingers and thumbs, and it's surprising how quickly you can work along. And notice at this stage I'm not worried about getting a good surface. That's not the point. The point is just to get it on and crudely level it out quickly. You'll see as we come back and keep tooling this, that the surface finish will improve with each pass of that blade. Okay, different camera angle now, and you'll see once again I'll come along with my PVA solution and just wet the surfaces of everything. I'll put maybe a bit too much on there. I'll probably come back in a minute and wipe a bit more of that off. But same thing, another block of clay. Work it between my fingers to sort of get it going, a bit more pliable. And as with plastering a wall, just chuck it down quickly, because we'll come back and tool this later. I think it's a mistake to try and get it flat as you lay it. Just push it in. And when you see it like this, you start to worry. You think, oh no, what have I done? This is going to be terrible. But it all works out good in the end. So I suppose I'm doing maybe 6 inches at a time, and then coming in with that palette knife. And the thing here is to, each time I use that palette knife, I just wipe it clean, again just as you would with a trowel. Any dried up bits can sort of scrape across the surface and tear the surface of it, so each time I just wipe it clean with my thumb. little bit more moisture. And again, you don't want to overdo the water in my opinion. I think I've just taken some off there with the sponge, because this stuff, once it becomes slimy, it makes a mess and it's a bit of a pain. Once it's all leveled out, you can mist water over it, and that can help you to get a really smooth finish. But for now, I think it's better off just put on as dry as you can, but it will need that wet surface to adhere. And there you go, just coming back and filling in a few bits. At the end, immediately by the camera, I'm going to intentionally leave that rough, because I'm going to extend this finish along, and when we get to that bit, probably in another video, you'll see how we can match the two finishes up perfectly. And that's pretty much all there is to it. Just as it begins to dry, just scrape it a few times to level it off, but don't overwork it. So here I'm taking a very cheap nylon paintbrush. I bought 4 or 5 of these, I think, for £1 from the pound shop. It's a terrible paintbrush, but you can see I'm just stippling the surface of this sort of fairly soft clay, and that's just imparting a little bit of a texture to the surface. Now I'm going to put a surface dressing over all of this, but I thought I'd just show you this. This in itself produces quite a pleasing finish, and I think for many people this will be good enough. What I'll do at the end, I'll show you a close-up of the finish that this brush action is leaving me with. And you'll see I twist the brush through sort of 45 degrees on each sort of go across the platform, just to randomise the textured pattern that I'm creating. And that's all there is to it, to texture a platform surface. And so that's it for today's episode. I'll leave you with this final shot of the station concourse. Now this is a very cruel picture in that it shows a lot of the filler around the window reveals of the station building, but that will all be cleaned up in time, and the window frames themselves and the decorative stonework will be added. But I leave here feeling quite uplifted with this photograph, because I can start to imagine the final vision of the project, and I'm quite pleased with the progress. Now bear in mind, this photo was composed from I think 3 or 4 separate photos that I stacked in Photoshop to try and maintain focus throughout the image, and it's caused some horizontal distortion, but anyway, I hope you like it. Till next time, take care everyone. Cheerio.